Alright guys, so today I'm going to talk about why it's not a great idea for your regular average player to be trying to copy the Federer forehand, and why it actually creates more errors, more problems than it usually helps. Now let's start by actually looking at what Roger Federer does when he's hitting the forehand. Roughly what he's doing is takes the racket back, holding the throat of the racket with his left hand, and then he drops it pretty steep. All right, pretty steep, almost like a triangle coming here and then this way. Now, as he's lowering the racket's now pointing at the camera, his arm's a little bit bent, and then as he rotates the body, the racket sort of flips into this position, his arm gets straight, and that sort of works as a slingshot. And you can see how that would generate a lot of power. Now, when people try and imitate this shot, what they generally do is they get a little bit locked here. The arm straightens, maybe it's locked from the shoulder, and it almost becomes this like clothesline shot. And that's not how Roger Federer is doing it. When you see Federer hitting a forehand, sometimes he's sort of bouncing it off of his straight arm. So the racket it'll come down, it'll flip, and he's kind of bouncing it off of his straight arm there, and that kind of works to generate that racket speed. But a lot of times, he's keeping his arm a little bit bent. It's not fully extending. So if that ball comes and it comes a little bit closer to him, he's able to make a lot of adjustments by bending his arm because it's not fully locked most of the time. So when people are trying to imitate this shot, they tend to get locked here. Sometimes they get locked before the racket flips, but even if you do it as the racket flips and you're a little bit too tense here, you're just generating your power sort of from the shoulder, and you actually lose racket speed. But I think more importantly, you lose the ability to make those adjustments from being able to maneuver your arm. Because generally when we're playing tennis, you don't want anything locked. Everything should be slightly bent because that's how the kinetic chain works best. As soon as you lock something out, it's going to affect the kinetic chain. I do think sometimes he bounces it off the arm, but I think for the most part, if you can hit a forehand and you don't have anything locked, I think that's really going to help you out. As I said, not just because you're trying to make those adjustments, I mean, that's key, but also just to feel like you're smooth and you have that nice smooth shot. As soon as something locks out, it generally becomes stiff, right? So if you are going to copy this Roger Federer forehand, which I don't really recommend, just try and keep your arm a little bit bent as you're trying to throw it out there and you're trying to straighten your arm. So it's kind of straightening your arm, but it's not straightening your arm. It's not locking your arm. Now, I'm a big believer in trying to generate momentum and rhythm and using gravity in your favor to generate that smooth racket speed. When you attempt the Federer shot, obviously he's really smooth, but when people generally attempt to copy Roger Federer, they're coming down here and it's a bit choppy because you're going this way and then this way, and it can become a little bit stiff because you're not using this momentum. It's coming down, it's stopping, and you're having to change direction. I have a friend who's always teaching on the next court to me, and I hear him all the time explaining the forehand like a roller coaster. Get it up here, let it drop, and use that momentum to carry the swing forwards, and that's how you're going to generate that smooth racket speed. And I think this Federer forehand of coming down here and then trying to change direction, if you don't time it perfectly, it can be a real struggle to start to change direction, especially if that arm is getting stiff. So for a lot of people, it's just hard work, and it's a lot better to keep your arm a little bit bent, take it up here, and just generate that smooth racket speed and not get stuck in any of these awkward positions, not lock up any joints, and feel like you can always make those adjustments. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give me a like and subscribe if you've not already. I think I'm at like 75% of people who watch my videos haven't subscribed, so make sure you hit that. And leave me a comment. I always respond to comments unless you guys are being nasty. Actually, I still respond even if you are nasty. But yeah, much appreciated, and I'll talk to you soon.
And you start imitating these things and you just look like Frankenstein. You look like a fool. You're not trying to strike the ball, right? You look like an idiot. I want to say, like, whenever whoever's commenting on the video about Federer forehand, like the listener will go in there and they'll actually try to do that one thing, and they'll fail miserably, right? So let's say, oh, we're talking about wrist lag. So they're going to be doing this stuff whenever they're trying to hit a Federer forehand. They're going to end up in these awkward positions trying to lag their wrist intentionally, when that's not the actual motivation of the tennis player executing the stroke. And so now any analytical thing you do, oh, the contact point needs to be further in front. So now they do this, right? So then all this other stuff, or like racket head needs to be down, or whatever the tennis player in question happens to do, Federer happens to do. And you start imitating these things, and you just look like Frankenstein. You look like a fool. You're not trying to strike the ball, right? You look like an idiot. You see what I'm saying? That's the issue. Is YouTube watchers trying to imitate, okay, what somebody says is happening in the shot. If you just watch a tennis pro, right? If you just watch them free flowing in a rally, you know, they'll look like this. Boom. So that's what you're going to be trying to notice. If you're just on silent, you mute the video and you just watch regular footage of a tennis pro, you know, you're just going to start like flowing through the shot, and you're going to feel all these necessary things. But when you start like breaking it down, you start charting things and putting like, you know, 75 degrees here and like 35.7 degrees here, and like, you know, approach velocity 39.9 miles per hour, you know, so then it loses it, because you're trying to micromanage. It's kind of like putting handcuffs on a horse, and it's just like trying to micromanage its gallop, right? It's like, nope, horse, nope, 3 degrees off, right? Can you imagine how that horse is going to gallop? It's going to be the ugliest thing ever.
I actually, in the video, I gave you a shout out to your roller coaster forehand analogy.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what I was saying. When people do the Federer thing, it gets choppy. They go down, stop, lock it out, clothesline. Like, they don't have this smooth rhythm and momentum. And I like that roller coaster thing of just using momentum and gravity to just get it moving smoothly.
Tell that to it. Was one of the
everyone, dude. Here.
Is that my thing? I didn't mention it so often.
All the time. I can't. Every time I look over, you're talking about roller coasters.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I think there's more value, right, in talking about general terms, a lot more value in talking about general terms and concepts that a hopeful has to grasp, rather than talking about technicalities that are true for someone. I think you would relate to this. Technicalities that are true for Federer but not true for anyone else. There's no value in that. Like, you need to talk about things like momentum. You got to talk about things like acceleration, or like, you know, fluidity, okay, or like widening your base, or center of gravity, or like weight shift, or you know, whatever. Think about events like striking or throwing or whatever it is that you're trying to convey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I don't think there's any value in teaching a player like, all right, this is how you should be like holding the racket now.
Yeah, like that's
put
what
it,
that
put
was.
it
What,
in this place, right, like 3 centimeters above your knee, and
well, that was my issue
angle.
with the pat the dog, right? You just get locked in that position.
It's so limiting.
And I see coaches. I'm not going to mention any names, but I see coaches with doing the serve where they start with the racket down the back. That's in the middle of a fluid motion.
Not sponsored.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Starting with the racket down the back on the serve is in the middle of a fluid motion.
Mm-hmm.
And you've pointed that out because
Roller coaster.
because you know it happens. So now you're micromanaging that thing that you know happens, and now the player does something awkward and rigid because they're trying to hit this spot, just like pat the dog. It's like, yeah, everyone pats the dog, but no one's thinking about pat the dog.
That's right. That's right. So that's what I think of your original question, is exactly all of the above. So everyone's gonna go wrong trying to imitate the wrong things. Instead of adhering to the principles and concepts of striking the forehand like Federer does, they'll adhere to technicalities and like visual cues and trying to copy the result rather than copying the process that got him there.
Mm-hmm. But totally agree with everything. I was trying to figure out if when Federer hits the forehand, if he actually straightens his arm out, because I don't think he does. I think on most of them, it's like slightly bent. I think sometimes he bounces it off. But I think people have this idea of a straight arm forehand, and then literally they have a straight arm, and now they look like they're trying to clothesline someone. You know what I mean? It's just like this.
It bounces off sometimes, but it doesn't actually bounce off bone on bone. Like when I see people locking their arms, they're bouncing, they're just holding the elbow in this locked position. Now, my number one advice for people is like when you step on a tennis court, number one advice. When you step on a tennis court, there's no more locking things, right?
Yeah.
After the ball is tossed, maybe you lock the elbow in a service toss or something.
Maybe.
But after that, nothing, no more locking until the point ends. Like if you want to rest on your hip and lock your knee out after the point, fine. But that's not going to happen during the point.
Good advice. Pro advice. I'll drink to that.
Cheers. Are you looking at your reflection? Is that why you're holding it like that?
Yeah, look amazing.